Welcome to History Pub. The Cottage Grove Genealogical Society and the downtown Cottage Grove sponsor the History Pub. But in Cottage Grove we have a group of historic organizations that all work together. We collaborate, and those are the Cottage Grove Historical Museum, the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society, the Oregon Aviation Society, the Cottage Grove Historical Society, the Cottage Grove Library, Bohemian Mining Museum, and Singing Creek. If you are looking for a volunteer opportunity, any one of those organizations would be happy to talk with you. And so we all enjoy History Pub, right? Yeah. So if you're interested in helping keeping these going, please talk to Ruth. Because as of January, the close of January's History Pub, I won't be doing the presentation, coordination, or be the MC. I need to concentrate on the Genealogical Society and my personal life. So if you are interested in helping carry this on, please talk to Ruth. And I want to thank the Woodard Family Foundation for giving us a grant to put the Ancestry.com and Newspapers.com Oregon collection on our computers at the Genealogical Society. And so if you're interested in looking up historical research or genealogical or family history research, we'd be happy to help you. And I really hope that everyone is excited about the new revitalization of Main Street, because I think it will be an improvement. I've heard some naysayers, and I keep saying, let's take this. It's a gift. And I want to thank Jim Lockhart for capturing these on video. They're available on the CG Genealogy YouTube page or channel. And I want to thank Dana Meriday for his wonderful promotion of the History Pubs. Every few days he has something out there. And thank you, Dana. So I want to say, for those of you who missed the Letitia Carson History Pub, unfortunately it was a disaster trying to film that. We tried to do it ourselves and it didn't do very well. This Saturday, Jim and I are going to Roseburg to the Museum Historical Society, and Dr. Bob Zybeck is going to redo the Letitia Carson story, and Jim's going to capture it on video, and I hope he lets us put it on our YouTube channel so everyone can see that again, because that was a fabulous story.
Thank you, Debbie. Deborah Monsev, probably one of the very best historians this town has ever had. Yeah. And I encourage all of you, if you haven't done your family history or your DNA, skip on down to the Genealogical Society. They'll do a great job, and if yours is like mine, it could really change your life. To me, it was just kind of a joke. I didn't really care who my people were, and wow, she gave me a whole different family that I was not aware of one bit. Start with this slide here. Next month, December 10th at 5:30, the History Pub is going to be Opal Whiteley's 127th birthday. That is, if you count it by the Whiteley, the way the Whiteleys counted. I think she's only 126 by her calculation, but yeah, it's the birthday for the princess, and we'll have a lot of fun. We'll hopefully have a cake and just some good festivities. But tonight we're going to talk about the Reverend Olson, David Olson, and the title of this talk, I guess, it's like a gusher of lies. But did he have good intentions? And was he a crook and a con man, as the histories seem to portray him? The histories we have portray him as a con man and a buffoon. I'm going to show that he was perhaps a con man, but he was far from a buffoon. This wouldn't be possible without the photographs and articles from the Cottage Grove Museum, and Becky and Kathy from the museum are here. Thank you all so much. every historical society in town, but especially these individuals down here who wrote about. Kurt Dethridge, who has a blog that is excellent. You can just look him up, Kurt Dethridge, Cottage Grove blog. It's excellent. Gordon Grable in Cottage Grove was a past. Peggy McCall was a writer for the Sentinel. Claire Cooley wrote for the Lane County Historian, and Deborah Monson just researches everything in Cottage Grove. Here's a look at it. They're getting ready to dedicate it. It's November 9th, 1923, so almost exactly 101 years ago. This is up on Mount David, and if any of y'all get really interested, you can take a hike up there. Most of us can make it up there anymore, and see the big hole that our town's so proud of. And down at the bottom, it's still got the little casing. It's our little well. And some people, whenever I do a talk like this, and I specialize, or I somehow find the stories that other people might not want to do and other people might not want to see done. And they're potentially embarrassing, but they're real history that happened to real people. And this one is absolutely fascinating. What I'd really like, I hope we get a good recording of this talk, so what I'd really like is to get somebody who's going for a PhD to do a thesis on the oil well at Mount David and the one in Eugene, because I'm going to throw up here some speculations, but if I'm half right, this is a way more fascinating story than what we know. And the whole thing was a humongous injustice on Cottage Grove, but did our good Reverend have good intentions? And what really happened to him? Was he put in jail? Did he just vanish someplace? What really happened to the Reverend Oily Olson? Now here is a share of stock that was sold. This belonged to Benny Hubbell's father. And if you didn't know Benny Hubbell, you missed knowing the town saint. I was fortunate enough to be his neighbor when my wife and I first got married. And he kept the share certificates, and I think each share was for $100,000. I mean, $100. Each share was worth $100. A realtor in town, Tom Aubrey, very well known and respected realtor at the town, that helped sell these stock certificates. In fact, everybody involved was pretty respectable around. Oh, by the way, speaking of respectable, I'm wearing this gold miner's hat here from the Evening Star Gold Mine because y'all would all run out of the room if you saw my bald head. And also, gold fever and oil fever are so much the same, and I know this because I've been around both. And to put things in perspective, Oily Olson pulled out about $250,000, $250,000. That's close to $4 million today. And you consider that the population of Cottage Grove was only about 2,000, and Eugene about 10,000. So this is a heck of a lot of money that's pulled out. Where did it go? That's the question. Where did it go? And our understanding of him is really shaped by The Golden Was the Past article, Wildcat Judas by Gordon Grable. And it's a good start, but it ends portraying him as a buffoon and inmates that he got locked up on a scam in Canada, which Deborah Monsiv and I couldn't find any evidence that he was ever arrested for a single thing. And Kurt Dethridge's article is really good. He calls it a case of, can anybody see and pronounce this name? The mental health professional knows what it is. This is Fear of Friday the 13th. And it'll show you how Friday the 13th comes into this story. So who was this man? Was he a respected minister, which before this oil well, he certainly was? Was he just, how did he get away with it? Why wasn't he ever arrested? Let me tell you, coming from Louisiana, this man would have not only been arrested, but a lot worse. And he's kind of like this big joke, but I'm going to show you how there's a real twist in that story. And again, where's the money? So what's his motive? Did he just do this to steal money? Or did he have some higher purpose? He said over and over that all profits go to Christian activities. Just like all of our profits tonight are going to go to historical activities. But he said all the profits were going to go to Christian activities. Now, let's find out a little bit about who he was. In 1900, he's sent from Eugene Divinity School, that's Bushnell University today. They figure very prominently in this story. Sent him to the logging community of Windling up near Marcola. And at the time, Eugene Sanderson was the president of Eugene Divinity School. I think he was the founder, and Mr. Bushnell was one of the original founders of the university too. So here he is in 1906 at the Cottage Grove Christian Church, that's right down the street at 6th and Gibbs. And he's speaking to a convention for women's rights, and interesting enough, Dr. Sanderson from Eugene Bible College is down here too. And Olson gives the entire collection plate to the cause of women's voting. And this is 1906, which, that's a pretty advanced thing to do. This is quite a long, interesting article. And you'll see at the bottom of most of my slides, because I have this online, there's the hyperlink where you could click and go and read the original newspaper article, which will always have much more, lots of other fascinating info. But given the entire collection plate to women's voting rights, this is what the First Christian Church looked like back in the early 1900s. This is probably a 4th of July parade because people have got a lot of horns, and there's music equipment, there's American flags. But unfortunately, and this was the church that Opal Whiteley went to. And unfortunately, it was burned and rebuilt. The current church down there at 6th and Gibbs. And I figured if I'm going to have them in my show, I should at least point out they have Sunday services at 10 a.m. and they would welcome any of you. Yeah, it really has got a lot of old history in the community. The Bohemian Nugget wrote about young Reverend Olson, says he's an enthusiast and he's willing to tackle all kinds of jobs. This is 1906, and he's raising money to build a gym for the church and community kids. Then in 1907, Reverend Olson leaves Cottage Grove, and Reverend Elkins comes in to the Christian church. Reverend Elkins is the one who then, a few years later, baptizes Opal Whiteley. And all the stories you hear about Opal Whiteley in church and quoting the Bible for 2 hours at a time happened down there at the Christian church. And they have a really nice reception for him. And Reverend Wilkins figures prominently in the story too, because there were 3 ministers involved in these oil wells. Oily Olson, one, and then his replacement, Willard Elkins, and Dr. Sanderson. And just some interesting things that you pick up. I'm very much indebted to Joanne Skelton from the Genealogy Society, providing a lot of information on Reverend Olson. She attends that church down there, Olson's church, and so she was able to get a lot of the old things from church. But Reverend Elkins, he was really good at drawing cartoons, and he's very popular with telling stories. And that's where Christian Endeavor, that the organization at Opal Whiteley got so deeply involved of, that's where it started in Cottage Grove. And these are the good pictures of Reverend David Olson, and these from 1908 to 1909, at least when these came out, and it calls him one of the hardest working men in the Brotherhood. Now, he went to Minnesota. He was from the Midwest. He bought 787 acres, and he builds this campus with all these pledges and annuities, and he raises $75,000 for that Minnesota college, which will later figure into the story. And he's a young man when he's doing that. He is active. Joanne Skelton graciously put together this timeline of all the incidents that we could find by research or the church histories of Reverend Olson's life, so you can track his all the references in the newspapers and churches that we could find, and he was a very active fellow. Well, let's take a quick look at the times that was had. This is 1923. This is the Roaring '20s. This is the boom time for oil and gas. Automobiles coming out just like wildfire. Everybody wanted, and every town wanted to be in on the action. People didn't know, we didn't know where the oil and gas was in 1923. Some places were already known down in Texas, Louisiana, California, but really, just about any town in the country was hoping that they had oil and gas, and this is so it's not that outlandish that people in Cottage Grove want to believe that there could be oil here, especially when it's couched in the words that the Reverend used. And his first will was for Eugene Bible College, and he just couldn't stop doing good work, so he came down here to build us an oil well too. Now this is Dr. Sanderson. I put a lot of text on this one, but he was the founder of the Eugene Bible College. It's now Bushnell, and he was the founder of Pacific Christian Hospital, that is the forerunner of Sacred Heart. It cost about $225,000 to build that hospital in Eugene, and it also had a school for nurses, and they began construction February 1923. So the same year he's drilling oil wells, they're building this hospital down. That's the Sacred Heart Hospital that many of us were at, down near the university. But it must not have worked out that he spent $250,000 on it in 23. In 1936, he sold it to the Sisters of Joseph for $50,000, and they renamed it Sacred Heart Hospital. Now this is from his own Wikipedia page. He served as the second president of that Minneapolis Bible College, still in operation today, that had been founded by David Olson. So these guys are tight for a long time. This is the first advertisement. It really advertises, come to a meeting that's happening in Eugene. And Kurt Deathridge noticed that it was on a Friday night, and then looked up Friday night, April 13, 1923, and found out it was a Friday the 13th. So that's where we get Kurt. And I really encourage you all to read Kurt Deathridge's blogs. They are a lot of fun. And now what's curious about down here in small print, it says to come early to get a seat, because the Eugene Bible University's male choir is going to do a 20-minute musical program, and the whole meeting is going to be presided over Dr. Sanderson. So Dr. Sanderson of the Bible College is the one who is presiding over this meeting. So these fellows are tight. First notice I could find in Cottage Grove paper, April 20th, 1923. See, and you see the original article, how large the headline is, it goes almost all the way across the front of the newspaper. Gushers for Cottage Grove predicted. It says, Reverend David Olson says he has spent many nights on our hills locating oil with weird machines that have never failed. And this is the returning minister. He was a minister from here. So yeah, we're going to trust him. We're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's still a practicing minister. Except now when he goes away, he comes back, suddenly he's become an oil geologist. And he says Lane County has just big oil. And he claims in the next issue of the Sentinel that because of his research, he can say that oil is going to flow within a year, guaranteed. Now, it's hard to underestimate how big of a promotion he made, but this was true in other towns too. Cottage Grove not unique, but a promoter makes these statements like, we'll hit such a great amount of oil, you'll never have to pay taxes again. We can really pave Main Street with gold. Your schools will be the best in the country. The population will double. Everything wonderful that could happen to a community would happen if this well was successful. So if you're against it, if you're against this progress, we have to really question, just how much of a Cottage Grove person you are, and truly even, sir, how much of a Christian you are. That is the language he used. If you were against him, you were against him. It was because the whole thing was all the profits go to Christian activities. Remember that? So you're against God. So April, oil's going to flow, and he's just got such assurances of success. You better get in on it immediately. And he also says this just to sweeten it up. And he doesn't need the money. He just wants to help the community. That's all. He doesn't need the money. And Cottage Grove's the last place in the world he would make promises he could not fulfill. Yes. And if this whole thing was just one lone shyster reverend, that'd be one thing. But we've got three very respectable ministers involved in this. And so they were all either caught up in the oil mania of the 1920s. And if you don't know what mania is, it's like gold fever. It's just where you got to get in on something right now. You're going to miss it. If you miss it, you'll regret it your rest of your life. And mania, you make these really crazy decisions sometime because you're so hot for something. And he says he's located 100 oil wells around Cottage Grove. So everybody's going to prosper. And he's got his famous instruments. And here again, he says all profits will fund Christian activities and the Americanization movement. Now, the Americanization movement was not some kind of Ku Klux Klan kind of thing. Olson was Swedish, and it was teaching primarily Swedes and Norwegian immigrants, teaching them English, teaching them American customs so that they would be good American citizens. And these instruments, I've heard descriptions, but never actually been able to find a picture. There were eight instruments I think he had. Now, the University of Oregon Emerald, they make fun of Oily Olson, and they are the ones who nickname him Oily Olson. Comes from the Daily Emerald. It's the first mention. Oily's Hocus Pocus and Olson versus Oology. April 29th, 1923. And here's an eyewitness account of one of the meetings. Writer Clara Cooley from the Lane County Historian, he described the machines, and one of the machines, the Reverend had this Packard automobile, which was just under a Cadillac back in the day. And a Packard, it was a luxury Packard too, and they did make several models of those. My grandmother had one. But his machine, he said, there had a bell that when he drove over oil, it would ring that bell. And on top of the Packard, he had this copper wire antenna that always pointed to oil. You know, it's a variation of the old witching things where, you know, go out looking for water like that. Just a variation of that. Worked pretty well because after all, God was showing him this. You know, it's like, and here the oil derrick, they start the construction in June, and the Woodard and Chambers Mills provide the lumber for this 100-foot tall derrick. So, but this may be one of the turning points when the Woodard and Chamber mill provides the lumber, because that gives Mr. Woodard a good opportunity to go up there and look at things. And he does not like what he sees. This is a photograph from the Woodard family. These, if the first three men I was talking about were the villains, here are the heroes. And what I love about embarrassing, controversial stories is wherever there's a villain, you find a hero comes up against them. We're just like that. And so in our story, the Woodard family has done so much for Cottage Grove, but it's, I believe it's A.L. Woodard, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, A.L. Woodard over the far left, who was the one who actually went down to California. Oh, he's in the middle?
Yeah, that's A.L.
Oh, okay. Or J.F. How about which one is J.F.?
He's the one behind, second from the right.
Right here?
No, second, in the back.
He's in the back.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Okay, so, you know.
John Woodard.
John Woodard. Okay, great. Thank you. And, you know, without this man doing what he did, and let me tell you, he took a risk, because at that time, you know, all the churches were getting promoted on it. And if you didn't believe in this, well, it did question your faith, your belief in your town, and do you even want Cottage Grove to grow? You know, it questioned all of that. And here, August 27th, he announces that drilling is going to start in 30 days. Get that stopped now. Population is going to double overnight, and one of the sad things that starts happening is, in addition to people mortgaging their houses to buy this stock, was people pull their property off the market because they're getting convinced with a big oil strike their house might be worth 3, 4, 5 times as much as it is. And this oil field we have in Cottage Grove will be one of the best in the world. Yeah. Now, here it comes closer. Here we are, November 9th. This is dedication day now. And there's a number of articles, and this is when I just, the Woodards and Reverend Olson, they really battle for this town. And each says the other is lying. And each is backed by reputable people. And the realtor, Tom Avery, and Reverend Elkins from the church, they go down to California, where Olson has some more wells at Half Moon Bay. And they come back very pleased with Half Moon Bay. And Mr. Woodard is not believed for a while, or at least there's a stop to him, because these men, reputable men, say everything at Half Moon is good. Whereas Mr. Woodard looks at Half Moon and says, there's not a thing going down here. And here's the dedication ceremony. This, being from the South, that's always bothers. Looks like somebody's going to get lynched, like the town got lynched. This is the dedication ceremony. And here's they got a real big crowd up there. Just all these ordinary people. If we blew up each individual face in there, we'd probably recognize a lot of people who who were pulled into it. Later on, people didn't want to admit it, but a lot of people were pulled into it. And then the Sentinel writes this big article, Woodard-Olson controversy brought to a close. Now this is November 15th. And, they're just starting to drill. No, the controversy had not been brought to a close. They had just started drilling. And over here, this article on this side, I should have cut it out and blown it up. But it says, oil drill hesitates as prayer to heaven is uttered. It's like the oil drill has a mind of its own and hesitates. And these three ministers, Olson, Sanderson, and Elkins, are all praying for the oil well. And nothing in what I say should be taken as a knock against ministers who do wonderful work. My wife's a church organist, and I'm involved in churches. They do the hard work that a lot of other people don't want to do. And but once in a while, some wolf comes along to fleece the flock. Maybe that's how that flocking got in there. Okay, but he gets a Christmas present on December 20th. While they're drilling the oil well up here and he's being called a fraud, Half Moon Bay wells explode. They've got a lot of oil. And he's got wells down there. The only problem is he doesn't have any of the oil on his land. It's all around him. Funniest thing. So he didn't get the right information on that one. And then a little bit later, I put these in chronological order. In January 1924, Olson's College in Minneapolis is really going through hard times. And Reverend Sanderson and the Eugene College, they rescue Olson's College. Now, and it continues there. So this begs the question that if the Eugene Bible University had to rescue Olson, what happened to the money? Because this is January 24. He's collecting the money starting probably August 1923. So a lot of money has passed through his hands. Start bringing up the question to me, what happened to it? Another lucky break for Olson. There's an earth trimmer at the oil derrick, and he immediately claims it's a sure sign that that's oil trying to break out. I mean, any child in Louisiana knows oil doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. It doesn't, folks. But our people around the university geologists were trying to counter him, but he used terms like, well, they're just foolologists. That's what they are, and they believe in evolution. That was another thing he hit them with. You can't trust what they say because they believe in evolution. So you just can't trust. And they're not petroleum geologists. They're just rock geologists. That last part was true. But they knew enough that Lane County didn't have oil, and the University of Oregon tried to tell people. But the investors are starting to get jittery, and he comes up with this great idea. He claims that he says Big Oil knows about this well, and they're keeping it secret. They're trying to keep everything secret so that they can grab Oregon's oil for themselves. What a great way to get out of a corner. Claim that. 1925, drilling and money, it slows down, and Olson responds with a 3-page ad a full 1-page ad in the Sentinel about all these reasons why he believes that there is oil in Oregon. Some of these are just great. It's a full-page ad. Gushers are all around Oregon, Washington State, Canada, Montana, California. We're down here. We're downhill from the North Pole. Oil flows downhill. It does not. Gets better. Top geologists agree with Reverend Olson. Nope, not a single Oregon geologist believed him. And Lane County is in a valley, and that causes oil to drain downhill. We're getting the oil from Portland drain downhill. And of course, we have fossil beds. So we're going to have oil, and sometimes oil, that's something he did get partly right. Sometimes you find oil at fossil beds, not always. And here's a big shot of this. This was a giant article. And it's just, the thing, when you read it going through this, it's hard to believe that people would go for it. But people in the grip of mania, where you really want something to be true, you ignore all the facts that aren't in your favor. It's called confirmation bias, and we all have it to some extent. And then Easter, wow, April 23rd, oil struck at Eugene, and he promises big dividends. Never paid because the amount of oil was just enough for a barrel or two. It was virtually nothing. But there's this other, the whole thing's worthwhile, this other great story right next to it. The women of the Christian church down the street rebel because the men say you must wear hats in church. So they determined to defy men, it says, and this was so that women had to wear hats in church. It made nationwide news that a whole church of women refused to wear hats. Happened right down the street. A lot of unknown history around. And now here's something where I start questioning what happened to the money. Because Reverend Olson's, in December 1926, and this is a year after the drilling started, his home is foreclosed on. He owes a little over $4,000. And why? Now, he said he was not going to take money for himself. Maybe he didn't, because his home does get foreclosed on, and he does drive a nice automobile, but he didn't. It's pretty obvious to me that if he took the money for himself, he stashed it. And you just can't find it easily by looking at his lifestyle. But there is another possibility of what did Reverend Olson do with all that money? And did it go to Christian activities? He might have been telling the truth. Now, this is a neat article. This is from an article that Peggy McCall wrote for the Sentinel. And the Eugene oil well, in December 1926, was in trouble. Eugene Bible University owned 92,000 shares of stock in the oil wells. 92,000 shares. And Dr. Sanderson is on the board. Olson's still president. There are some new directors who want to have an audit of the books. They absolutely squashed that motion, and Olson is able to carry on. But the Bible University has 92,000 shares of the oil stock. The article says it was donated. This is the kind of thing that there might be a paper trail to. I've sent emails to folks at the college before, but I haven't had a response, and I can kind of understand why. They probably would rather forget this part of their history. We all have some part of history that we'd like to forget. Now, here we are, 1926. Our Derek goes to Hollywood. And there it is. It's in a lot of scenes of The General. Yeah, just about any. This is looking at where Safeway is and slightly to the left. But that's there. And I don't think they had oil derricks like that during the Civil War. But we're in. Thank you, Cottage Grove Museum, for the oil derrick and locating it there. That's great. Now, Oily leaves Cottage Grove in the area, but he doesn't get out of the oil business. And here he is in Montana, And now he's calling himself just a geologist and lecturer. And he says he's got all these wonderful, he's got all these talks scheduled, he's got all these wonderful machines. And here he is also in Montana, Whitefish, Montana, with the doodle bug oil locator. I would love to have a picture of what the doodle bug looked like. And 1,000 people in this little community come out and watch this little doodle bug search for oil in Montana, which Montana does have oil, so he wasn't too far on. Meanwhile, the Oregon Corporation Commissioner has done a full investigation and announces in 1928 that they've lost a total fortune in this oil scam, and nobody will be able to get any of their money back. He had promised a money-back guarantee, by the way, money-back guarantee, but he contended Eugene Well stops drilling at about 3,600 feet. I think same here, and the article notes the people who mortgaged their homes, who lost their homes. And meanwhile, he's still in working away in Montana and Wyoming. And then and in 1929, he comes, this is like 6 years after, 5.5 years after, he's just pulled $250,000, almost $4 million out of me. He comes back to Eugene and says he's got 150,000 acres in Montana and 10 companies drilling for him, but he just might finish that Eugene well because it means a lot to him. So he stays in Eugene on that story till the 1930s, and he is traveling around some. 1929, he's in Winnipeg, and here he is giving a lecture on science and immortality. He calls himself a paleontologist, geologist, and evangelist. When we were... Okay, and here he's up in Canada. This is where his stories can be up in Canada. Now, I love this headline. He is coming. It's like Jesus is coming. He is coming. And there was one letter to the editor that questioned his degrees, and he had like 5 or 6 more degrees, he claimed, besides being a geologist, paleontologist, pastor. There were several other, and guess what he's lecturing on? Evolution. And he has all these claims that he's endorsed by all these famous people. And it just gets, he is coming. And this is your big chance right now. Would you risk $1 to make $100? Yeah, anybody would. So just go ahead and read. This is a whole page ad from Spokane. And now he's an eminent oil geologist. And he's also a geologist in the 1930 census, thanks to the Genealogical Society for that. And this is the language that whether, that oil, just any kind of mania, you got to get it now. This is such a good deal. You just have to risk $1. You could get 100 back. Why not? And a few dollars now, thousands later. And here he is in Spokane in 1936, and they're doing a test of, he says they're going to find oil at a depth of 2,762 feet. Yeah, he's so certain he's going to find oil 2,762 feet down. Yeah, we can't do that kind of prediction today. He's fabulous. He had these 8 gadgets that were so accurate they could be used in an automobile going 40 miles an hour. And there's one gadget shaped like a gander's neck, and the forked rod is guaranteed to find oil under the surface. And it's accurate to within a mile. And so, but, this is where our current histories that we have kind of fade out his story, that he kind of disappears, maybe gets in trouble, and maybe gets put in jail. That doesn't happen at all. He doesn't disappear. He doesn't get in jail. He goes down to Los Angeles, actually to, thank you, Alvarado Christian Church, and he makes this Bible game, and he's pastor of this church, and he sells this game based on the Bible. And he's pastor of that church until he dies in 1943, and he has a very respectable grave down there in Glendale, California. And now the real kicker is in 1940, Reverend Olson returned here, and how many years is that since the oil well? 1940, 1923, is that 17 years? He comes back to Cottage Grove, and I can't see how on earth you would do that, but he comes back for the Christian Church's 50th anniversary, and he's well treated, you know. At least he gets out of town alive. But yeah, he comes back to town just 13 years after, and it says local history says he just fades into obscurity. But yeah, he knew he was never prosecuted, and he continued preaching right up until his death, and preaching and selling things. Our oily Olson. I wonder if his Southern California congregation ever found out about him, because he seems to have come back and forth, and you know that they're the same denomination of church. I don't know. He might have had a thing where he said he gave all the money to Christian activities. Maybe so. So in the end, who do we have with Reverend Ole Olson? You know, was he really a respectable minister? Or was he just a con man believing his own myths? And how he got away with it, and what happened to that money? Which I don't want to say this exactly happened, but he raised $250,000 at about the same time that the Sacred Heart Hospital, soon to be Sacred Heart Hospital, needed $225,000. And the university's got $92,000 shares of stock. To me, as an outsider, not being too smart in the money department, but it looks to me kind of like that our money went to build Sacred Heart, or at least into the Eugene Bible University. So when y'all pass by the Bible University up there, just waving, they should thank us. It is and I don't want to say negative things about it, because they've produced a lot. That college has produced a lot of good people over the last 100 and something years. It's produced a lot of good people. One of whom happens to he's the general manager of the New Orleans Saints football team. Yeah, and he's like our big joke. But it's such a good. Did you have a question, ma'am?
No, but I want to say Joanne graduated from that college.
Joanne Skelton graduated from that college. Yeah, I wonder if they gave her a scholarship with oil money. But yeah, there were a lot of people who went to Opal Whiteley went to that college to do some classes. Opal Whiteley at this time, she was in 1920 or 1970, she was taking classes. She was finishing her high school diploma at Springfield High School, taking classes at the University of Oregon, and taking classes at the Eugene Bible University. And we're left with this question, just what happened to that money? Because it had to go someplace. He does not seem to have profited from it, or else he wouldn't have gone, his home wouldn't have been foreclosed on. It just doesn't he has a nice car, but other than that, I can't see where Olson profited from it. And this is our little oil well today. Both us seniors can go up there. I'm sure most of us have been up there and looked at it. we really should put a fence around it and make it some kind of local landmark, something like that.
Before they build houses.
I mean, I don't think anybody wants it covered up, or I don't know, but you know, that was one of the first things. I was staying in a house in the neighborhood down there, and that was one of the first things I saw when I came here from Louisiana, and I knew instantly that what they had tried to drill oil there. Yes.
Did he really drill down, or is that just a fake?
No, he did drill down. He drilled down, and yeah, and that's yeah, he believed his thing. At a certain point, when you say something over and over and over, you just really come to believe it. And yeah, and that I think is exactly what happened. But he always, and if you're doing it for a good cause, that's the important thing. If you're doing it for a good cause, you can slaughter hundreds of thousands of people and feel wonderful about it, if it's for a good cause. But, and the same thing with this, and if it had worked, and we really had 100 oil wells around Cottage Grove, well, we'd be, really, yeah, it would be a really big town. We would have benefited tremendously from it. But at this time, you can't criticize the people at that time, because people all over the United States were digging for oil and gas. And many of them, there were these kind of guys, or guys with just a little bit of knowledge in the oil and gas business. However, if my talk has inspired any of you to want to get involved in the oil and gas business and, drill, baby, drill, I got some friends in Louisiana who would be glad to help you. And I'm going back there for Thanksgiving. So, yeah, just talk to me. Well, that's true, actually. I do. And there's our oil well on Mount David in 1923. And so, okay, it's 6 o'clock now. I can stop and then go for questions. He's asking, did he change his tactics because of the Great Depression? Probably not. Probably doubled down on the same things. That's, my memory of things like that in Louisiana. Yeah, he probably wouldn't have. I think he funneled, that money had to go someplace. He's asking what's my opinion of where the money went. And that money had to go someplace. He doesn't seem to have pocketed it. He had a couple of daughters, maybe gave it to them. But that's a lot of money. At the same time, the university that he graduated from, who supported him and was part of, he didn't just graduate from Eugene Divinity School. I mean, they came to the meetings, and they conducted the meetings, and they brought their glee club. So I think the money went that way to the college, and may have gotten funneled into Sacred Heart, for the future Sacred Heart Hospital. Thank you. Did y'all hear that? He pointed out that in the 30s the hospital was really having financial trouble, and they sold it to the Sisters of St. Joseph. Yeah, they built the hospital, and there was a point I found that they were having trouble building the hospital, which to build a modern hospital down there cost around $250,000, coincidentally about the amount of money that was taken out of Cottage Grove and Eugene. I don't know exactly that they profited from it. I do know that the report says that the university, the college, had 92,000 shares of stock, and they seem to be at every meeting that he had. Dr. Sanderson and also Reverend Wilkins, who, did I put in there that Reverend Wilkins baptized Opal Whiteley? Yeah. So she didn't know Olson, but his successor baptized Opal Whiteley. But yeah, I've seen greed and fear really up close, and I've seen how people will just ignore the sayings of an expert because they want to believe it's on their property, and everybody wants to. Oh, Dr. Sanderson? He's probably buried in Eugene in very, very respectable grave. He's held in very high esteem. I didn't find much about, there's not much in the biographical material about him. His name appears a lot in the newspaper articles at the time. You know, he wanted to put a derrick up on Mount David because it would be seen for miles. Imagine a 100-foot tall derrick on top of Mount David. I mean, you could see it from almost any place. And so what a great way to promote more wells. Oh, and I didn't have the slide in here, I'm sorry, but he also, at around this same time, he went to Sutherland and drilled a well there, and he even went to Drain and drilled a well there. So he's all over the place, drilling wells, telling people that this is it. And I would, you know, more records for this must exist up at the college, but I haven't been able to get access to them. He's pointing out this oil derrick cost a lot of money itself to do. So a Ponzi scheme where you take money from investors and you sell more than 100%. And he probably wound up selling more than 100% of the oil well. I don't know if it had just boomed tremendously. No, I don't, but again, if somebody did a good academic thesis, we've got the names of places that he was in and where he did do oil things. So somebody could go to those historical societies in Montana, in Winnipeg and Spokane, and dig into the records there. There's a lot of records, just like we have a lot of records in our museums and historical societies, you know, that are not online. We can get a lot of stuff offline, but isn't anybody going to ask me, is there really oil there? Oh, but you know, we don't know that for sure. You know, Councilor Mereday's here. I mean, suppose we could drill Mount David, you know, like drill down 3,000, 6,000 feet. Let's frack Mount David. There's oil down there. If we drill down deep enough and frack Mount David, we could be rich and prove the Reverend right. So there's a small amount of natural gas in Mist, Oregon. How many of us know where Mist, Oregon is? I mean, this is a really small area. So we don't, Oregon, and the geologist told people that at the time. But you just don't want to believe people. Like when Mr. Woodard went to California and he looked at those wells and saw that this was a sham. This was not, these wells weren't really producing anything like what he said. He claimed that he discovered half the oil in Half Moon Bay, California, which is a big oil field. It's kind of interesting that such a gigantic oil field, and he happens to have the one piece of property where there's no oil on. Maybe that was God telling him something. But anyway, he claimed, and Reverend Elkins, a man with a really good reputation, backs him up with it, goes down there and says, yeah, there's oil all over the place. And just directly contradicting what Mr. Woodard said. And so you have these two sides, back and forth, back and forth. You know, there's oil there, there's no oil there, you know, there's no oil there. And the man used religion and patriotism and love of community to an astonishing degree, because, I mean, who among us wants to be the one who stopped Cottage Grove from prospering? I mean, you know, just think, it's just, yeah, who wants to, yeah, but that was a great thing. It took a lot of courage for Mr. Woodard to go down there, because all the business people in town certainly must have hoped that there was oil there, because if there was oil on Mount David, it would have been a huge boon for Cottage Grove business. And so I don't think your ancestor did himself at the time any favors at that moment. You know, when, I mean, who wants to be the one to come in and say, wait a second, that isn't true, and blow everybody's dreams, especially when people like Mr. Benny Hubbard, and he had a tiny house over here on 3rd Street, that older folks, I mean, his dad, that was a lot of money. And it was he had $1,200 worth of stock. And, you know, the nicest man that I ever met in Cottage Grove, his dad, you know, had all this stock in this phony oil well. It pulled a lot of good, scams pull more good people who want to believe in things than they do cynics. She's asking, did the community come together and help each other decide that this may have happened in individual churches because he did sell a lot of stock through churches? So maybe it happened as a general community thing. I think people were really embarrassed, and it wasn't. I mean, there was no list of names posted. So and so has bought stock. So and so has bought stock. So and so has bought stock. At least that I've seen. So I imagine once the whole thing started looking like a fraud, most people kind of scrambled and didn't want to be known as part of it. And yeah, I like them. Becky, y'all have stock certificates at the museum, right? Say just a few people donated their stock certificates to the museum for posterity, because you know it's got your name written on it, sucker. So I can see how a lot of people just burn those things as quick as they could and wanted to forget about it. But it cost a lot of people a lot of money. And like the Oregon Corporation Commissioner, they had tons of letters from people saying, and we should try to get copies of the copies for that may still exist. But you're saying we lost our house, we lost everything we had because we believed in this. But somehow everything kept cooking at the church down the street, 6th and Gibbs, Sunday morning, 10 o'clock. But yeah, they kept on going. Elkins had a fine career. Dr. Sanderson had a fine career. Olson even had a fine career after going around the entire Northwest doing oil well. Yes, there are two. His obituary, or Find a Grave, has him with 2 daughters when he died in 1943. And we could try to find, you know, if the daughters had, but it's funny, if you do a search for his name, David E. Olson, you'll find things that were written like in the 40s and 50s, and they're fairly complimentary. His Wikipedia page is complimentary. You won't find much that's written about the oil wells. No, you have to look at the local papers to find the oil well stuff. He didn't advertise that along with it. But you know, he's in Southern California where they had a lot of oil wells. I don't know, he might have tried something down there at the Alvador Christian Church that he was with. But one of the points I wanted to have in that is to show that he didn't disappear into obscurity. He didn't go to jail. He proudly pastored another church, and he came up here at least twice and visited. That blows my mind that someone didn't grab him and shake him down when he came here. It just blows. So it must have been he was very good at conveying, I'm not making any money. It's all for Christian activities.